So hi, my name is Cujo. I am back from Europe. Made it back in one piece. I was in Europe for probably about a week and a half, and there was a lot that happened in that span of time. Like, I brought a lot with me, anticipating that I was going to spend time reading and writing a lot and playing on my Switch and stuff like that. But it just so happens that traveling takes a lot more attention than I tend to think it does, and it's a lot more energetically draining. So basically, my vacation to Europe was a lot more demanding than a vacation. Took a lot of attention and a lot of energy from me. And now I'm technically on my vacation. I got back home and get just a little bit of time before I go to work to actually relax and wind down, which I'm really grateful for. Both the time that I was in Europe and the time that I get to spend now actually resting. I learned a lot from traveling in Europe, but I do have to acknowledge that I spent a lot of energy, and it's something that I don't want to do all the time because traveling is just very draining, and it kind of threw my routine into disarray. My diet kind of suffered, and my physical health I fell behind on it. I was walking a lot, but wasn't exercising the rest of my body all too much. So getting back has been kind of jumping hurdles and getting used to my old routine. I didn't exercise yesterday, and I was just pretty drained. Like, I didn't get the best sleep while I was on the trip, and then also my diet was different and I wasn't training, so my training was just less than it normally is, but I'm still grateful that I have my mindset that I showed up to do the training. But anyway, on my trip I was able to finish a couple books, and there's going to be one that I kind of reference. It's going to be the theme of what I talk about right now. This is actually my first book that I read by Plato, and it's called the Symposium. And it was very weird how I went on a trip to Greece and Italy, and when I was reading this book, I was in Athens, and the book takes place in Athens. So it's just I accidentally brought a book with me. I knew it was Greek philosophy, didn't realize it was in Athens. And that's exactly where I was for a little bit of the time that I was reading. It was in Athens, and then I went to Naxos. So yeah, it's cool. I was in the home of the philosophers, but I do have to acknowledge that their home right now, Athens, it's kind of dirty. It's kind of a messy place, sadly. But I'll talk about the Symposium. Essentially, to try to explain how Plato writes is really hard, I think, because Plato interweaves his own monologue with a retelling of a story, and apparently he interweaves kind of like playing up stuff, like almost fictionizing something and not just a factual retelling of what happened. Like, he kind of fictionalizes the ideas or makes the entire idea revolve around what a person was saying. I don't really know how to explain that better, but basically the ideas that he agreed with, he put on a pedestal and then kind of dumbed down the other ideas that he didn't agree with, which, knowing that in context, it makes sense because the book centers around Socrates, who is a part of this symposium. And to give you also a little bit of context about what symposiums were basically like a social gathering for people in the society. You would think it would lead to just be philosophers there, but it was actually like philosophers and politicians. There was playwrights there. People from all walks of life got together and had a group public speaking session where they each took turns and basically gave their own ideas about what they thought about something. And this particular book, the Symposium, this instance of the Symposium takes around the ideas of what love means to the people involved. So there's a few notable people who talk about love in the Symposium. There's a guy named Aristophanes. There's a guy named Alcibiades, I think is his name, who are characters that talk in the Symposium. But the most notable one, like I said earlier, is Socrates. Essentially, they kind of talk about, they all idolize love as like this thing to be achieved. So all people talk about how love is so grand and it drives all of our behavior and a thing that we should aspire to, when Socrates actually pointed out that love comes from a place of lack, or their version of love and desire comes from lacking without something. Which if you desire something, if you love something, and you want it to be part of your own, there's a perception of you lacking that thing. Like, if I want a girlfriend, there's a lack of said girlfriend, and then it will make my behavior come through like that, that I lack the thing that I desire a ton, is what Socrates points out to these people that are talking about love. But Socrates goes to talk about how essentially everything on the outside of you that you desire, you can find a way to achieve it internally, and you can rid yourself of all desire and achieve everything internally that people are trying to externally achieve. So there's like a big dialect of how beauty is. Essentially, Socrates kind of says beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but people who take on philosophy or virtue or just any ideas in general, they move from what they called a common love, which was a love between two people and a desire for the other, to a heavenly love where virtue and ideas and learning about the world is what the person aspires to. And if you pursue heavenly love, Socrates said that you move from a desire love where you want the other person or you want things and you pursue things, to where that desire and that love dissipates and you start to recognize beauty in the very small things. I think he said like a flower or just nature or just very, very small particular things that you didn't notice before. But then you start to love the small things with the same love that you desired for another person. And it essentially goes across all forms. Like you would love the flower the same amount that you would love the person across from you. And it becomes an entire universal thing. You love your enemy just the same amount that you love your lover. And then I think the book ends with Alcibiades basically saying like that he desired Socrates and that he loves what the man's saying, but he has no idea what the hell it even means, but he just can't help himself into following him anyway, which Socrates kind of ends up because of Alcibiades. Like Alcibiades proves his point with the actions that he chooses to say and do at the end of the book. But anyway, that's kind of like a bunch of scrambled up mumbo jumbo. What did I take away from it? Plato is pretty hard to read, like I said earlier, so I'm going to just kind of try to boil what I took away from it, because I feel like me and Socrates kind of have the same idea about love, or how I see what love is. I think love is a decision and not a feeling. Like, I remember there was a small thing I wrote, I think probably 4 or 5 months ago, The Process is Love, and there's a video of it on the channel. But to me, attention into details and intentional action is what love is. So it's not so my desire for something is not what love is. Like desire is coming from a place of lack. Like it's not something that I have, to where I think love is non-attached, and I think love is a choice from action. Like pretty much giving yourself to others, I think, is love. But it comes from a place of deep admiration for beauty. Like I want to give myself to the things that I love as much as I can, but not from a place of expecting anything in return. I debate talking about this in this video too, because it was a more personal matter that happened to me while I was on this trip to Greece, but I am going to talk about it because I think it might further my point in the same way that Alcibiades furthered Socrates' points with his actions and his speech. So I was reading this while I was on the trip to Greece, and I went to Greece for a wedding, and at this wedding, everyone made the decision to drink, except myself, of course, because I'm like a badass philosopher like that or whatever. But no, I don't like to drink. I don't like the feeling of being drunk. I just like to stay sober. It's just how I prefer living my life and being conscious. I like to experience that as fully as I can, as self-conscious, as consciously aware as I can. And as everyone got more and more drunk, essentially I'm confronted with more, how would I put this, with less conscious behavior, I would say, or just more human behavior, where everyone's like laughing and carefree, and the decision making becomes more in the moment. Like they don't stop drinking, they keep drinking more and more, to where a sober person like myself in that moment could see like, okay, they're gonna get sick. Like they can't see what's coming, basically. But anyway, in the midst of everyone getting drunk, there was a girl there who had taken a liking to me, but I thought she was attractive too. There was a moment earlier during the dinner before the wedding, I had asked her on a date due to a lucky circumstance that allowed me to ask for the date, so she agreed. But the night of the wedding, she got really drunk, and then essentially, I don't know how to say it without it sounding like egotistical, but she was like all over me, like physically, like was holding my hand, laying her head on my shoulder, like grabbing my arm and stuff like that. And I'm single, so this doesn't necessarily bother me, but I noticed the desire for a relationship come up that I think I've struggled with this in the past where I haven't been aware of it. But this came up, and I didn't make any gestures back towards her because I want things to progress slower if that becomes something. But anyway, like fast forward through this wedding, she's really physically touchy with me, but she's also really drunk, and I'm just kind of chilling mostly for this wedding. But there was a bus that ended up taking all of us home, and on the bus, she had tried to kiss me, and I rejected her. There's a lot of different avenues I feel like I could go down in talking about rejecting a kiss from her, but I think in the moment it's just because that she was drunk and not in a clear headspace, and I honestly just want the best for her and myself, and I think that that's what the love is. Like, she has a desire for me right in that moment, but the desire for me or for something from me is not actually what the love is. For me, rejecting a kiss from her, but not necessarily rejecting her, I'm still going to go on a date with her. I think that that's what love actually is. Or I had shown her that I had a genuine concern for her well-being. Like, we had went on a walk and I just made sure that she didn't like fall from being drunk or anything, and just made sure that she made it back okay. Like, I have a genuine care for her well-being, but I don't desire anything from her or want anything from her in any way. But she's a very beautiful woman, and there's a recognition of beauty in her. But I think that that story is a good example of what Socrates was trying to say. It's not that I don't like her. I didn't reject the kiss because I didn't like her. The reason I did it is because I care about the well-being of both of us in the long run. That something like that would end up complicating things, and that if we could both show up for each other in a very slow, more small and natural way, and not explosive and trying to create all the stuff out the gate, I think that that's what love is love is just doing things in a virtuous way, choosing to show up for something, show attention to something in a non-attached way, not wanting anything but just giving because you have an excess to give. But I could be entirely wrong in it. Maybe I was the asshole in this situation. I shouldn't have rejected the kiss. Maybe she did just love me out the gate. I don't think that that's what it is, though. I think that she had just desire for something, and not that that's bad. It's definitely not bad. But yeah, I read the Symposium while I was on this trip. I finished it like a little bit after the wedding. It was very interesting to read something while I was going through an event that challenged that belief. And it makes me want to read more Plato and learn about more of what the older philosophers were saying, and talk about Socrates even a bit more. I could give more details about the book, but if you're just interested in the Symposium, I would recommend it, because essentially the same thing kind of happens to Socrates, where he rejects Alcibiades in a way, not intentionally, like he cares about Alcibiades, but Alcibiades is really attached to something from Socrates. He wants something from Socrates, and Socrates won't give it to him, but it's not out of like hatred or ignorance or anything like that. Socrates is just being Socrates. And I think that that's kind of my own situation in that too. Like, I was just being me. It's not that I hadn't rejected her, not that I didn't want anything from her. In fact, I would want a safe, healthy relationship or friendship to naturally blossom almost like a small flower, and not have like an explosive like candle flame or just fire that ignites and then dies out with like a flicker of smoke behind it. But yeah, let's hope that she shows up for the same thing. I mean, I can't control another person's behavior, but I can only choose how I respond, and I feel like I responded appropriately, and that's all that I want. So I want to be proud of myself and admire myself, and not try to get things from outside of me. I think that's what I showed myself in doing that. It's not that I rejected her, I just rejected a circumstance that I know will lead to something that is extremely risky for who I am. So hopefully, I know I went on a damn monologue, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. That happened in my trip to Greece. I also went to Italy, and that was a lot of fun too. The culture in Italy was very much different than the States. I mean, not a whole ton, but it was different enough for me to be like, have a perspective shift where my perspective was more outside of the bubble that I'm normally in. Like, people in Italy drink coffee after they eat a big meal, and apparently the combined nature of drinking coffee and walking right after you eat actually stabilizes your blood sugar, and the caffeine actually has a health benefit to walking right after eating. I don't know off the top of my head for that, but yeah, I was just learning a ton about Italian culture when I was in Italy, and how like the culture of coffee is way different than the States. And yeah, I can make something just talking about Italy. I'm back in the States. I'm back in front of my mic. I have some cool ideas I'm going to try to execute, but I just kind of wanted to record this on the time off that I have. Love is non-attached. Love is not to obtain beauty, but to be in the face of beauty, to multiply in the face of beauty. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. Hopefully it makes some sense. If I don't make any sense, maybe you should read the Symposium by Plato. I think Socrates for his time was a really intelligent philosopher, and he floors a lot of the people inside of the book, probably even Plato, because Plato made a majority of the book just what Socrates had to say about love. So hit me up on Instagram or anywhere in the YouTube comments, and I can answer any questions. Or I want to play games more with the people that I talk to, so if you want to play a game or something, just hit me up. I'm going to make more of an effort to try to find time to do that. I thought also about starting live streaming, so if there's any interest for that, I would really love like a comment or a message on something like that. I think it would give me more incentive to trying to do something like that. But eventually I think I will. It's just in the stewing of my brain right now. Because yeah, I would just love to hang out with people who listen to me or message me, talk to me. It would do a lot for me and hopefully for others. So yeah, thank you for taking the time to watch this. There's more coming, don't worry. Hit like, subscribe, all the YouTube shenanigans. I love you, and goodbye now.